Hari Hari, Bhagavad Gita Teacher Certification, Module 2.4. Dashamrita Gita, number 7, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 17. Yukta hara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Krishna says, one who is regulated in their habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. This verse is often overlooked because it is such a simple and straightforward verse. But in mastering kama, this verse is absolutely essential. We know kama is itcha, the pure will or desire that every jivatma has, perverted by ahankar, by ego. That's what kama is. And it manifests in this world in our 5 working senses, our 5 knowledge acquiring senses, our mind and intelligence. These 13 attributes that we have, 10 senses, mind and intelligence, they are constantly striving to seek gratification. Right? This is kama. In mastering kama, Krishna tells Arjuna in the beginning of the end of the 2nd chapter, remember, kama is like an incessant flow of rivers into the ocean. Incessant, doesn't stop. That's kama, this desire, this drive of the senses to interact with the sense objects. That is incessant. Krishna also uses fire as an example. He describes kama as an insatiable fire. Whatever you put in it, it'll burn up. You can keep putting, the more you try to gratify kama, the more it burns. So the method of mastering kama is not to feed it like a fire. It's not to be disturbed when the insatiable desires come assaulting us like rivers into the ocean, but to remain calm and steady like the ocean. But that takes considerable practice. That's entirely what spiritual development is about. We know the 6 Arishad Dvargas are rooted in kama, kam, krodh, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. So the mastery of kama is essential. Meanwhile, kama is a natural, healthy part of being in a material body. If we have a healthy material body, a healthy mind, healthy intelligence, healthy senses, then the very nature of such health is that kama is evident. It is because we have a material body, because we have a healthy material body, that kama exists. If we were unhealthy, if we were diseased, then we would not have a healthy mind, healthy body, and so forth. So, how do we master kama and live in this world successfully? As the Purusharthas advise, the way to live with kama in this world happily is by mastering kama. But until we have mastered kama, because mastering kama essentially means moksha, until we have fully and completely mastered karma, what do? That is this verse. By regulating our eating, sleeping, recreation, and so on, then we can actually mitigate the negative effects of karma burning everything up in our life, of karma rushing into the ocean and us getting disturbed by regulating our lifestyle, our habits. Let's pick this apart a bit. Let's understand happiness from the viewpoint of the Bhagavad Gita and Vedic literature. Happiness can be described using two words in Sanskrit, sukha and ananda. Let's start with sukha. Sukha means happiness. In the beginning of the second chapter, Krishna said, Matra sparshastu kaunteya si toshna sukha dukkha da. Agama paino nityas tamsa tikshasva bharata. Krishna says one must tolerate sukha and dukkha, happiness, sukha, and distress, dukkha. Krishna says one must tolerate these things and treat them and understand them to be like sitoshna, sukha dukkha da. Sitoshna. We must recognize that they're like winter and summer. They are going to happen to us whether we want them or not. No one wants distress, but we're often in distressful situations. Happiness, even though we always work towards happiness, sometimes we achieve it, sometimes we don't, and oftentimes we experience happiness that are beyond our control. We're offered a job that we want, but the fact that we get the job and are offered the position is out of our control. So happiness and distress are like winter and summer. They're cyclical. They will come, they will go, regardless of our control. They're not always within our direct control. So we must understand sukha and dukkha in that light. Krishna also says in the same verse, it arises, sukha or dukkha, from sense perception. In other words, it is the result of the senses interacting with the sense objects. I'm hungry, I'm given something nice to eat, I experience happiness. I'm hungry, I'm given a banana to eat, I'm in distress. Don't like bananas. The senses interacting with the sense objects is where sukha and dukkha are experienced. Pleasure, happiness, displeasure, distress. Ananda is of a different quality. Ananda means also happiness, pleasure, bliss, but it is independent. It is not, let's say, it does not necessitate the material mind and senses. Of course, bear with me. We live in a material body, we have a material mind and material senses. So we cannot experience ananda without our mind, intelligence, and senses because we are embodied in this mind, intelligence, and senses. So obviously, our experience of Ananda is also going to be through the body that we have. It's going to manifest, right? The great sages and saints of Vedic literature manifest their Ananda hair standing on end, so on and so forth. They exhibited many, many symptoms of experiencing Ananda in this body. That is obviously uh, is accepted. But more than that is that Ananda can be experienced without a material body, mind, and senses. That's what makes Ananda unique. Ananda does not require the senses to be in contact with the sense objects. What we receive in terms of our material reality, what we experience in our material reality, does not have any effect on whether or not we can experience Ananda. Because Ananda is derived from our eternal spiritual nature as Jivatma, our Svarup. Svarup means our own identity. Sva means one's own, Rupa means form, literally. Our Svarup, our spiritual form, our spiritual nature, our very spiritual being is Ananda. So the experience of Ananda does not require, is not dependent upon whether I have a pizza in front of me or bananas. Sukha does. Sukha is required, does necessitate that I have a pizza instead of bananas. If I have a pizza instead of bananas, then I can experience sukha. This is not the case for Ananda. Whether there's a pizza in front of me or bananas in front of me, I can still experience Ananda because Ananda is not dependent upon the proclivity for the inclination and preferences of my material senses, mind, and intelligence. Ananda comes from and exists as the very nature of the Jivatma. It is our Svarup. We do not experience Ananda because of a very, very particular reason. Ahankar, yes. False identification with the body. Because of our false identification with the material body, we are not in sync, we're not in harmony, we're not in connection with our own spiritual selves. So we continue to seek out, we continue to chase the sense objects in order to experience sukha. But there is more. We'll come to that. So this is a difference between sukha and ananda. Both are happiness, both are pleasure, but one is based on the senses interacting favorably with the sense objects. That's sukha. One does not require that, does not necessitate, is not dependent upon what our senses experience in the material reality, because Ananda is who we are on a spiritual level. Issues of attachment and detachment, extremely important in our spiritual and personal growth. Many spiritual practices talk about giving up attachment altogether. In fact, I believe Buddhism, if I'm not incorrect, much of Buddhism is about giving up, ridding oneself of attachment. And if you read a lot of versions or commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also talks about don't be attached. When Krishna talks about don't be attached, and when the Vedas particularly talk about giving up attachment or becoming detached, it's different from, I won't say Buddhism because I do not know. I will simply say it is different from other spiritual processes that say one must rid themselves of attachment. The idea being that because we have attachments to the outcomes, because we have attachments to pizza, when we don't get that pizza, we experience suffering. Therefore, it follows that all suffering in the world comes ultimately from attachments. Therefore, if we wipe out all attachment, we automatically wipe out all suffering. Many spiritual practices and processes advocate that, and that's a perfectly valid spiritual practice, process, and goal. In Vedic spirituality, particularly in the Bhagavad Gita, attachment is looked at differently. Krishna advocates detachment, absolutely. But there is also advocacy for attachment. Let us explore. Let's start with raga. Raga means, you can say feelings, but is often translated as attachment. Sangha also means like connection. These are Sanskrit words that are commonly used to describe attachment. But it is particularly and very specifically attachment to particular sense objects. If we go back to Sukha, Sukha is specifically about the material senses coming in contact with their preferred sense object. My taste buds preferring a particular meal. That is Sukha. Similarly, Raga, Sangha, this attachment is to activities, realities, objects pertaining to the preferences of my material mind, intelligence, and senses. So I become attached to pizza. If I don't get the pizza, I become distressed, right? So various spiritual processes will say, don't be attached to the pizza. If you're not attached to the pizza, you will never experience distress. Because if you don't get the pizza, you will not experience distress. So don't be attached to the pizza. Those are some valid spiritual practices and processes. Perfectly fine. However, the teachings of Krishna and much of the Vedic literature is detachment. Practice detachment. This is different from just giving up attachment, negating attachment. When Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, don't be attached, Krishna says, don't be attached to the results of your activities, Krishna is not saying give up, negate attachment altogether. Krishna is saying become detached. So this is not about, in Krishna's teachings, this is not about invalidating or negating attachment. It is about becoming detached. Let's explore that. I'm sorry, I have the uh, wrong slide came up, but be that as it may. Vairagya. We'll come back to Asakti, but first, Vairagya. Vairagya means detachment. Vai, the prefix, means not. Ragya is from raga, attachment. Not attached. This is detachment. Krishna says detachment is the way. Become detached. So what is detachment? If attachment or raga, sangha, is the yearning for experience of sukha, right? It's yearning for the senses, excuse me. It is the yearning for the senses to interact with their preferred sense objects. It is the yearning for my taste buds to interact with the foods that I like. That is attachment. And this belief that if I receive that pizza, my happiness, my ananda specifically, comes from my senses interacting with those preferred sense objects. My ananda, my unending satisfaction, my eternal, most fulfilled satisfaction will come from that interaction. That's an erroneous belief. That is attachment. That is an erroneous belief. Detachment is a realization, just like attachment is also a belief that if I get the pizza, I'll experience fulfillment. If I get the pizza, I will experience sukha. I will experience happiness. My senses will be titillated for sure. But that's not ananda. That is not full and complete fulfillment, an expression of my spiritual being, Surup. It is merely the satiation of my material senses in a preferred manner. That's an attachment. That's an erroneous belief that I will be fulfilled by connecting with, engaging with, achieving my sense objects. That is an erroneous belief because the sense objects and the senses are temporary. And that's the key point. They are temporary. The senses are temporary, my senses are temporary, the sense objects are temporary, and the satisfaction experience from the interaction of the two is also temporary. Winter, summer comes and goes. So, this belief that if my senses are interacting with the sense objects is the source of my complete satisfaction, that's an erroneous belief. It's an attachment, it's raga, it's sangha, but it is erroneous because it's not true. There's a Sanskrit phrase called asat sangha tyaga. Asat means temporary. Asat sangha means association or connection with. Asat sangha tyaga. Tyaga means to give up. Asat sangha tyaga means give up, become detached from those things which are temporary. Become detached from those things which are temporary. This is detachment. This is vairagya. Vairagya is the realization that ananda is not sukha. Ananda is the very nature of our being. It is our svarup. It is who we are. So the experience of ananda, the experience of spiritual bliss, has nothing to do, is not dependent upon the acuity of our senses, or what is happening rather between our senses and the sense objects. Ananda is beyond that. This is detachment. Detachment is not running away to the forest, giving up everything, standing on your head, and only have two pairs of underwear to your name. That's not detachment. We talked about this in a previous video, how Krishna calls such detachment mityachara, a pretender. Falgu vairagya is another term. Falgu means false, vairagya means detachment. Externally, it looks like you're detached because you only have two pairs of underwear to your name, but you have such attachment to these two pairs of underwear that if a person steals one of your pair of underwear, you go and you start a war. There's still attachment. So detachment is the realization that I can experience Ananda regardless of what the interaction is between my senses and the sense objects around me. That is sukha. That is fine. I'm not denying that, but my Ananda, my experience, my manifestation, my ability to live in Ananda is not dependent upon my senses coming in contact with very specific or my preferred sense objects. That is detachment. It is a realization. It is not walking away from anything. It is a state of being. That is Vairagya. Let us talk about, excuse me, asakti. As I mentioned, some spiritual processes want to do away with attachment altogether. If you have no attachments, you can never be disappointed. I was on a road trip and I saw one bumper sticker. This was a long time ago. It's such a wonderful, one of the best bumper stickers I've ever seen, philosophically speaking. And was it a bumper sticker? Yeah, it was a bumper sticker. It said the number one cause of divorce is marriage. I believe it was on a bumper sticker that I saw that. Yes, the number one cause of divorce is marriage. This is the same, and it's accurate. It is absolutely accurate. If you're not married, you can never get a divorce. You will never be divorced if you never get married. Similarly, if you do not become attached to anything, you can never get disappointed. You will never experience disappointment and distress because you're not attached to anything. And that's a very uh, valid philosophical understanding and way to live if you choose to live that way. I'm not disparaging that. But Krishna says something else. Krishna says there's something higher than simply not being distressed. I'll say higher, so there's more to simply not being distressed. And this is where the idea of asakti comes. So it's not about giving up attachment. It is about asat sanga tyaga. Give up attachment to those things which are asat. Give up attachment to those things which are temporary. But become attached to those things which are eternal. This is asakti. Asakti means attachment. Asakti means attachment. But it means attachment to those things which are eternal. This is asakti. When we are attached to those things which are eternal, we then are able to experience both disappointments and satisfaction. This is called love, bhakti. If you do not have any kind of attachment whatsoever, if we negate all attachment, you also negate the possibility of love. Because love requires two. Love requires individuality. Love requires choice. Love requires freedom. When there's choice, freedom, individuality in a relationship, there is inevitability in terms of disappointment. Person you love likes bananas. I don't. So when she puts bananas in the fruit salad, What do we have? Conflict. Not violence. I'm saying conflict. There's nothing wrong with conflict. In fact, and this is a bit of an aside, in bhakti, conflict is used and transformed to make the bonds of love stronger. That's an aside. We're talking about asakti. So asakti is spiritual attachment. Asakti is attachment to those things which are eternal. So it is not to negate, to deny attachment. It is asatsanga tyaga. Give up attachment to those things which are temporary. The pizza is temporary. Your material senses are temporary. This material body is temporary. Give up attachment to those things. And attachment, what does attachment mean? Attachment means the belief, the erroneous belief, that these temporary things are the source of my ultimate fulfillment. They're not. You can experience some happiness, some temporary pleasure, absolutely. But they are not the source of my ultimate fulfillment. That's an attachment. That's an erroneous belief. Give up that belief. Come to the realization that I am Jivatma, I am Swarup. Ananda is a very part of my nature. So my ultimate satisfaction comes to being attached to asakti, becoming attached to that which is eternal, because I am eternal. That is asakti. Now, in the meantime, we're not there yet. Let's get practical. We're in a material body. We have material mind and senses. Rivers are flowing to the ocean. Everything's on fire, right? Kama's burning, insatiable fire, desires, attachments. What do we do here and now to master kama while we are progressing spiritually and coming to asakti, while we're coming to our spiritual realization, while we're moving towards and progressing towards moksha? What do we do today? What do we do now? Saturday, September 13th. How do I deal with kama? That's the verse we're dealing with today. One who is regulated in their habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Regulated living. That's how we master kama while we are maturing, progressing spiritually in our other sadhana activities. Regulated lifestyle, disciplined living. Hari Hari.